Yesterday was the feast of Our Lady of Fatima. And of course, Rome was going to have to mark the occasion in some way. I don't believe this Friday they're going to overtly reject Marian prophecies and Marian apparitions, not so closely to the feast of Our Lady of Fatima, which modern Rome continues to invoke. If anything, they will do a sort of revision of Marian messages by making an absurd claim that heaven doesn't punish or chastise the faithful. To make such a claim, you have to have never read the Bible or read any of history. It's pretty clear that God does occasionally chastise people. He has to. But they chose the message of Fatima, the anniversary of Fatima, to tell everybody that resistance to Francis is the problem in the church. Go figure. I think after yesterday's live stream, I think people can understand that there's a bigger problem in the church than resisting Francis. Before we get all to this main story today, I want to give you a bit of a lighter story from Catholic World Report to give you an idea of the depths of intellectual thinking that we are receiving in Rome today. So this was yesterday, or 2 days ago rather. Headline from Catholic World Report: Pope Francis on Mother's Day. Let us pray also for mothers in heaven. Pray for mothers in heaven. Now, why would this really begs a question? Why would someone enjoying the beatific vision need prayers? If you are in heaven, you are enjoying the beatific vision. You have no need for prayers. This is very strange stuff, but almost no one has ever accused Francis of having a coherent theology that is even vaguely Catholic. This is really strange stuff, so let's just make sure this is what he's actually saying. So from the article, quote, on Mother's Day, Pope Francis entrusted all mothers to the Blessed Virgin Mary, asking everyone to remember to also pray for all the mothers who have gone to heaven. Speaking from the window of the Apostolic Palace on May 12th, Pope Francis asked the crowd gathered in St. Peter's Square for a round of applause to celebrate all mothers. Mother's Day is celebrated in many countries today. We reflect with gratitude on all mothers, and let us also pray for mothers who have gone to heaven. We entrust mothers to the protection of Mary, our Heavenly Mother, the Pope said. End quote. Now he goes on to remind us to invoke Our Lady in our own life's journey to heaven. And that's totally fine. That's a Catholic thing to do. Ask for the intercessory prayers of the saints, and especially of the Queen of Heaven. There's no problem with any of that. The problem is, of course, that again, when you are in heaven, you have no need for intercessory prayers. The point of intercessory prayers is to, for say the souls in purgatory, is to do, penance for them, or you intercede for them on earth to get them out of purgatory faster, or you ask the saints in heaven to pray for your intentions, because our Lord is more likely to listen to, a saint in heaven than necessarily us, or take their petition seriously. Now, Mother's Day was itself weird, but then again, the next day was the feast of Our Lady of Fatima. So we are going to go right here to this story, which is from a website called Sette Margins, which is a news site out of Europe. And you had this story of covering the various addresses given by various bishops at the address at Fatima this year. I'm going to focus here, though, on synodality, because the Vatican can't help themselves. They have to talk about synodality every single opportunity they get. So this is detailing Cardinal Juan Jose Omea. He was the one who addressed the pilgrims going to the actual pilgrimage site at Fatima. In addition to being expected to talk about peace and the unfortunate inclusion of secular politics into the overall peace message, which is what he'll do. And it's hard to talk about peace in the context of the reality of multiple major wars going on in the world without getting into secular politics, but there's a way to do it without necessarily becoming political about it. And the Vatican's very bad about that these days. But Bishop Omea had this to say, because of course, we have to focus on synodality. That's the most important thing in the world and in the church right now. So from the article, quote, Cardinal Juan Jose Omea, Archbishop of Barcelona, who presides this year at the International Pilgrimage in May, said that he brings to Fatima his concerns about the synodal path launched by the Pope. I came to ask the Virgin Mary in a special way to help the Church to advance on the synodal path, which is difficult for us to understand and live, he told journalists, also quoted by Ecclesia. The official, who is part of the Council of Cardinals that advises Francis, considered that the proposal for union and communion of the 2021 to 2024 Synod, quote, is good for the Church and good for the world and good for humanity. Walking together in a world of division, of polarization, for the Church to be a sign of union and communion is good for the Church, he insisted. Admitting that, quote, there is a lot of resistance to the Synod, Cardinal Omea maintained that the path started by the Pope, there is no turning back, meaning it's permanent. No one is going to stop him, he insisted. Asked about the future of this process after the assembly that will take place in October at the Vatican, Bishop Omea highlighted that Francisco has the desire to continue, end quote, meaning Francis will be around for a while. So yes, synodality is here to stay, or so said the bishop presiding over the Fatima pilgrimage. And I told you that to give you this message from the bishop. Stop resisting Francis. He said this at the Fatima pilgrimage yesterday also, to no one's great surprise. So we go to an account on Twitter that if you are not following it, you really should. They do it's called Cath Sat. They tend to watch a lot of the live speeches that don't get reported on out of the Vatican. Like a lot of news sites don't report on these, but they tend to watch these and give you juicy little quotes like this one. Speaking in Fatima today, Juan Jose Bishop Omea said, quote, a church divided, a church that is one against another, a church that is not with Pope Francis, with Jesus Christ, with the sweet Christ on earth that is the Pope, not united, capable of forgiving and helping each other, will not evangelize. End quote. So at Fatima, if we are not united and rallying around Francis, we won't evangelize, meaning we won't spread the gospel. Not that there's been a whole lot of gospel spreading going on from Rome these past few years anyway, but that's their message at Fatima. Unity, unity, unity. Rally round Francis and support his synodal program for remaking the Catholic Church into the image and likeness of the modernists who pushed very hard after Vatican II to decentralize power from the Roman Curia, and especially from the papacy, into the hands of first the local bishops, and eventually down to the laity. Maggie in the chat asks, why doesn't anyone ever ask what the synodal path actually means? They speak these stupid general terms that no one can understand because it means nothing. Path to hell, maybe. I mean, that's definitely the thing. Frank says, stop resisting. Is that the cry of the American cop? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what they do. This stuff treats Francis like he's an oracle. And a lot of these guys actually will tell you they believe that God sent Francis to change the church, that the church needed changing, that God's mind had changed essentially on some matters of doctrine and theology, and that the church had gotten it wrong or something. That's essentially their argument about this. And they don't get a lot, they don't understand what it is they're doing, I don't think. But we have something from a bishop here who knows Francis very, very well. I've presented his writings to you before. This is Archbishop Aguer. He's the Emeritus Archbishop of La Plata, who was replaced by Cardinal Fernandez in that post when Francis became Pope. He was his old arch nemesis, essentially. Francis would take some weird, not Catholic position in the internal debates in Argentina and South America, and Archbishop Hector Aguer would, without question, almost always oppose him by taking the Catholic position on things. So the Life site gives us this headline: Archbishop Aguer, smoke of Satan has made the structures of the church unbreathable. For more than 60 years, the church in the West has been suffering a systemic fall in the number of priests, religious seminarians, and even baptisms. Isn't it time to sincerely admit that the smoke of Satan has made our structures unbreathable? That is something that none of them want to admit, and they don't want to admit what the source of the smoke of Satan is, which is the infiltration thesis. And you saw, for those familiar with the history of Vatican II, you saw John the 23rd, with Cardinal Ottaviani, present a whole bunch of documents. They're called the schema for the direction of Vatican II, for the council. They expected the council to take 6 weeks. They had all the documents ready. They thought that they would be read by people, maybe minor revisions suggested, they'd be voted on, passed, and then they'd all go home. Vatican II took 3 years because at the outset, the bishops there, at the direction of the advisors, who were all extreme modernists, rejected all the schema. They kept one and they revised it heavily. That was Sacrosanctum Concilium, on the liturgy. Paul VI later would lament that through some fissure, the smoke of Satan had entered the church. And that fissure was when John the 23rd opened the windows of the church to the world to let some fresh air in, to borrow his phrase. And now this bishop is saying that the structures of the church are now unbreathable, meaning we're getting to the point where if something doesn't change, it's going to be getting much, much worse. So here's his letter. It's not terribly long. The progressive officialdom installed in Rome for slightly more than a decade continues its policy of canceling those who, with freedom of spirit, seek to serve Jesus Christ from orthodoxy and tradition. What is meant by canceling is all forms of ignoring, conspiracy of silence, marginalization, prohibition to publish in the media and on social networks, and even the termination of the functions of those who do not synodally bow to Vatican ideologies and discretions. Good bishops such as Daniel Fernandez Torres of Arecibo, Puerto Rico, Joseph Strickland of Tyler, Texas, were canceled. Cardinal Gerhard Mueller was not brought back for a new term in the Congregation, now dicastery, for the doctrine of the faith, and Cardinal Raymond Burke was even deprived of his salary in Roman Flat. Others, such as Dominique Rey of Fréjus Toulon in France, had their powers limited by the appointment of new coadjutors who almost co-govern those dioceses in practice. There are also numerous priests in different parts of the world who have been dismissed. They have even formed associations to help each other and provide the basic necessities for their sustenance. In some cases, they have been left on the street and have had to find refuge in the homes of their elderly parents, siblings, or other relatives. I have already addressed them in other articles. I am constantly receiving mail, messages, and phone calls from faithful priests who do not fit into the official slogan of everyone, 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 and who therefore remain outside the system. The famous Peronist maxim has been imported into Rome. For the friend, everything; for the enemy, supposed or imagined, no justice. Even the code of canon law seems to be dead and buried. Practically speaking, in the face of accusations of being backwardists, worshippers of ashes, rigid, and other similar labels, one can only wait for the mechanism without further ado to end them, basically. The lay faithful suffer in alarm at so many arbitrary acts. They see how good priests are systematically forced to leave their parishes or sent to destinations considered as punishment. The much declared peripheries are the places chosen for this. They are literally left to their own devices. Alone, without a priestly community, without resources, and exposed to all kinds of dangers, not a few find illness and crisis there. Accusations of being not very synodal or of not being open to the culture of encounter lead to various forms of banishment. Or is it the case that encounter is confused with gathering? Are not all believers, let alone priests, called to have a liberating and personal encounter with Christ and to lead other brothers and sisters to him? Or is it now that the Lord must be replaced with Mother Earth, the big program for the end of the decade, considered by its mentors as the gospel of the 21st century? As an aside, they have said that it's the gospel of the 21st century. Or the worldwide impositions and alleged plan to run everything of the UN. Do those Pelagian types who pretend to save the common home seek the salvation of souls? For more than 60 years, the Church in the West has been suffering a systematic fall in the number of priests, religious, seminarians, and even baptisms. The glacial period that followed Vatican II reflects a seemingly unchecked decadence. Hasn't the time come to recognize that along this path only more calamities are to be expected? And even if there is a pity for today's nonagenarian champion of the spirit of the council, isn't it time to sincerely admit that the smoke of Satan has made our structures unbreathable? Certainly the church cannot be remotely compared to a multinational corporation. Keeping due proportions in mind, however, it is worth asking these questions. Are these people who founded several branches of a company being maintained and even rewarded with promotions? Can it be expected that these responsible for the failure will recover sales and save the institution from bankruptcy? Today, the Vatican's progressive officialdom is showing its ferocity against the traditional liturgy. Hundreds of young people go there, to the traditional liturgy, while in the attractive liturgies, the gaps are more and more notorious. Young married couples with many children are also looked down upon by Rome. They are part of the solution, not part of the problem. In fact, statistics show that a good proportion of priestly and religious vocations come from their midst. Young priests, who, full of fervor and passion for Christ, truly seek to reach the last ones and convert them to the Lord, and are labeled as closed minded and concealers of various traumas, and so on and so forth. We could make an endless list of facts, all of them covered or justified by synodality, of course. Do they not see in Rome that progressivism is in itself sterile? Do they see as a threat the children and young people who, despite their mockery of their own parish priests, spend hours and hours before the Blessed Sacrament? Do they not see as true signs of the times and as well founded hope the rosaries of men that are multiplying in different cities of the world? Do they not appreciate the fervor of so many young people who encounter or return to the church after being disenchanted, precisely with progressive shenanigans? Does it fit with the Vatican's dialogic flexibility that all those who are different are very welcome, except the diverse within the church? As I said in a previous article to canceled priests, and now pass on to all those priests, religious and laity, who suffer from this condition. Pray for one another. Pray also for those who make you suffer. Do it before the tabernacle, adoring the Lord who is present there. Entrust yourselves filially to the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of God made man, Mother of the Church, Mother of each of us. As always, you can count on my prayers, my affection, and my closeness. And although my octogenarian condition and physical limitations prevent me from moving, know that I am with you on the front lines of the apostolate. Let us fear nothing and no one. May the words of Jesus Christ always resound in our hearts. I am with you always, even to the end of the age. See Matthew chapter 28, verse 20. Signed, Hector Aguer, Archbishop Emeritus of La Plata, Argentina. And it's again worth remembering that that bishop was Francis's sort of old nemesis. He hit retirement age not long after Francis came to power, and as is the legal requirement, at the age of 75, a bishop is required to submit his letter of resignation to Rome, to the Pope. Cardinal Supich just did this. He turned 75 on the Feast of St. Joseph, I believe. He is still there. His letter was not, quote, accepted. It's sitting in a desk waiting for Francis to accept it at some point, probably if Supich has some sort of ailment that requires him to step down, or when he hits age 80, which is usually how it goes. But even then, it's still up to Francis as long as he's still around. The day that Archbishop Aguer signed it, within hours, he got a response from the Pope, accepting his resignation within hours. To give you an idea of what we're dealing with here. Deplorical says, what is there to fear anyway? We're on the side that ultimately wins. Yes. Yes. They can do things in life, but they can't do things in eternity. Viola, it sounds like you've encountered a lot of the things that a lot of people that drive people into harder line traditionalism. I wouldn't necessarily spend too much time dwelling on it, and just instead firmly cling to things that have always been practiced in the church. But yes, that's where we are. Is there any final thoughts on here in this before we wrap it up this morning? Let's take a look here in the live chat. All right, folks. Yeah, Born Branded says Supich isn't ready to give up his colorful reign. Yeah, that's very true. And Francis, he's Francis's mouthpiece in America among the bishops, or one of them. Why would he send him home? The American bishops keep getting accused of being borderline schismatic for not going along with synodality and all the rest of it. And Supich is always there quickly to publish things on his own website, or give interviews, or write things for America Magazine or other things, correcting the record. And when he's finally gone, it'll be Cardinal McElroy who'll take his place for that job. Assuming, of course, that the next pope is somebody cut from the same cloth as Francis. It'd be interesting to see what'll happen if you get an even moderately orthodox pope who follows Francis, to see how they react when he inevitably has to tighten things down among that whole faction of the church. We have to be careful. There seems to be an expectation that my Immaculate Heart will triumph is not a claim that it'll be easy or triumph here on earth. I expected, I mean, again, I have read a lot of Catholic prophecy and things, and this through line is that there's a spiritual chastisement followed by a material chastisement, and the material chastisement is essentially the triumph. That all these structures of evil in the world will be swept away temporarily, and that for a generation afterwards you'll have relative peace. Generation in heaven's eye seems to be 40 years. That's what we'll see. Beyond that, I don't know. We may not be around when it happens, or we may not make it out the other side of the material chastisement, which is why it's always best to, yes, be aware of these things, but use it as motivation to go to the sacraments, stay in a state of grace, because the end of your personal world may be at any day, any time. You should be prepared for it. I have no idea who that is, Andrew. Next pope will come from Africa. Well, my news video today will show you that the African bishops who looked like they were great about things, they've embraced synodality fully. They fully endorsed it. As you will see in my news video that goes live in 30 minutes. Channel members, you have access to it right now. It'll go live to the public in 30 minutes. And they've embraced it. Embraced synodality. So I don't know if that's a necessarily good thing. Demon Killer reminds us 2029 will be 100 years since Tui. Yes. And it has to do with something Sister Lucia said. The Pope said the popes would follow in the example of the kings of France. They didn't do the consecration precisely as asked. And the kings of France were given 100 years. And 100 years to the day was the height of the French Revolution. So 2029. So that's a lot of people do accept that date. They're not even true to the orders they're supposed to be part of. It's tragic how short they've fallen as giants of Franciscan, Dominican, Jesuit, and so many other formerly great religious orders. Read Malachi Martin's book, The Jesuits. He later said he could have called that book The Religious Orders, because the story of the Jesuits is the same as the other ones. Thank you for becoming a channel member, Viola. It is appreciated. By the way, for channel members, you all get a free super chat about once a month. It's just part of being a channel member. Please use them. It highlights them in this way that I can bring up, makes it easy for me to see, and you get a free super chat out of it. Please do it. All right, folks. I think we're going to wrap that up here. Please, I'll have the letters there and some of Francis's odd statements on my sources page at Return to Tradition in just a few minutes after this live stream. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.